Hey friends, how you doing? It's a beautiful, snowy day. I decided to come out here and talk to you. It's a little bit cold. I got my coffee with me. I hope you guys got your coffee. I'm leaving this tree in the shot right here because there's a couple squirrels that keep walking around my feet, and I'm hoping they'll walk up here and I can give them a peanut on camera. But I wanted to talk about a lot of different things today, but like right off the top, I figured a lot of people keep asking me what I think about this Neil Young and Spotify thing. And man, I wish we could all take a deep breath when stuff like this happens and just think it over. Where I stand, I don't want to be the guy who rails against Spotify all the time, because I don't want to be the guy that like defends Spotify either. So I just kind of stay out of it. If you're listening to my music on Spotify, that's beautiful. You know, I feel like it would be very rude of me to give you a hard time for how you choose to listen to my music. But you know, if Neil has a problem with Spotify, I think it's beautiful that he pulls his music off of there, you know, or gives them an ultimatum. And I've asked some friends. I see a lot of friends who were really smart in the music community. We talk about it from time to time. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think I've ever met a musician. Well, that's not true. I don't want to be so bold, but the vast majority of musicians that I meet have zero nice to say about Spotify. They could really give two shits about Spotify. So if you know, it's a pretty good stance to take. It's a popular one to be anti-Spotify. I think that says a lot. That somebody like Neil Young. Oh, here we go. Got a friend here. Come on, Minnie. Can you guys see that? Come around the corner. Come on. Tell you what, I'll stick this. Talk amongst yourselves. Talk amongst yourselves. All right, you see that? I stuck a peanut right there. We'll see if a squirrel comes and gets it while I'm talking to you guys. I personally, the checks that I get from Spotify, I think they're pretty fair, but I own everything. And when you hear stories about artists who just aren't getting that much money from Spotify, even though they got millions of plays and they got like $100, I think a lot of times those artists signed deals years ago and the money's going somewhere. It's just those deals that they sign with record labels and management or whatever is making it to where that money does not make it to them. Are you coming around? And I hate talking about this kind of crap. You know, there's no solution to it other than just stop using Spotify, you know, or pull your music from it. How you doing? See a squirrel coming around the corner? I'm hoping it ends up in the shot. Hey, come on over here. I'm sorry if you guys came to hear music talk, but there's Minnie, my favorite squirrel over here. I also think Spotify is a private company. You know, we live in a capitalist society, even though they're in Sweden. Most of their business is over here, I'm guessing. And if they choose to put something on their platform, that's their business. And if people don't like that and they choose to do something to protest that one way or the other, whether that be to boycott or to pull, if a huge wave of big artists like Neil Young, if a bunch of artists like that pulled their music off of there, it might really make a difference. Because if Rogan is, you know, spreading anti-vax misinformation, and that's actually, the funny thing is it's actually against Spotify's terms of service, and they've gotten rid of podcasts already who are much smaller doing the same thing, but they make a lot of, I don't know, do they make money off of Rogan's podcast? I'm going to be honest, I never really liked his show. I listened to a couple few, and it wasn't for me. Just because it's not for me doesn't mean it isn't for other people. You know, I don't want to be the guy railing against that. I think that everything is working like it should. Neil doesn't like it, and he's taking a stand, and Spotify is going to react one way or the other about it. And if they decide that they pull a few different episodes of Joe Rogan off their platform, that's their right. They own, they own those things. And if Joe gets mad and he wants to go take his podcast somewhere else, there's a free market. There's no, people are saying censorship. The government isn't stepping in and saying you cannot do this. Not that I know of. And anyway, I've gone way farther into this crap than I really care to, but I think it's just one of those times that's good to just take a deep breath and realize maybe this is the way it's supposed to work. And Neil, I'll also say this, it just so happens sometimes, I don't want to go too hard on Neil because I really, really love Neil Young's music. He's taken stances in the past that I didn't feel real comfortable about, and he sometimes will go back and forth on different issues. I like where he's at on this one. That's just me personally. I like where he's at on this one, but so I don't want to say Neil's the perfect messenger for everything. Pretty great messenger for music, and it just so happens Neil put up a documentary on his page, his YouTube page, The Barn. Have you guys seen that? It's pretty damn all right. It feels really low budget. It feels like what I'm doing right here, but he's Neil Young. There's just a bunch of cameras that he threw out in his barn. Most of them aren't even handheld. And he's making music, with Crazy Horse. And it just sounds so ragged. That's probably the most generic term to refer to Neil, but man, it's just so imperfect. And so it feels good, Not all of the songs, I didn't really like all of the songs, but I really like that Neil artistically goes way out there. And sometimes you end up just coming up empty when you go way out there, but sometimes you find the really good stuff, and Neil's good at mining that really great stuff. So I just want to know, have you seen that? It's really good, and I've enjoyed it. And it's got to be fun to be Neil day to day. Have a great barn, all this land, your dogs are running loose, and hanging out with your friends, making music, playing a bunch of old beat up equipment and playing the hell out of it. That sounds like a good way to go through life. But if you haven't seen that, go watch it. I also saw that Bob Dylan sold, was it the physical copies? I don't remember the wording. He sold his catalog of recorded music, I believe, and I don't know what to think about it, man. When people were selling off their publishing and stuff like that, I'd feel a certain way about it. But more I think about it, I think maybe Bob sees he's not a young man, and he sees things like how the Zappa family are fighting over everything, which is really amazing for Frank Zappa being the person who was the devout capitalist and all of that. And he didn't take care of his stuff and left it for his family to fight over. And I don't know. I don't know how to take that, but I would hate to. Be great to be able to pass on a bunch of money to your family, but man, it'd be horrible to have them fight over it. And maybe when Dylan and other folks are selling things off, it makes that a little bit easier to take. And it also made me think about, since we're talking about Neil, like Neil Young owns Hank Williams D28's Martin D28, and like he loaned it to Bob Dylan to write songs on. How perfect is that? That's a pretty great. But I'm gonna have to drink some coffee. I hope you got yours. Like I said, Squirrel still has not taken the peanut. I also wanted to talk about. So I'm thinking about Bob Dylan. I don't know why, but this interview popped into my head of Paul Simon. Some of you might remember, but Bob Costas used to have an interview show that came on. Did it come on after David Letterman's show back in 90 or 91, somewhere around then. I don't remember how long it was on. It seems like he was only on for a couple of years. But it was very quiet. It was like a studio set, and there was no audience. And it was great. I mean, it was so great. I really loved it. At the time, you could not hear long-form interviews with musicians. There just weren't that many of them. And I didn't really dig Costas when I was a kid. I remember when the Cincinnati Bengals changed their helmets, and he was doing the football broadcast. He was like the in-studio guy. And he'd say, we'll take you to the guys with the funny helmets. And he would just seem like a smart ass and would make fun of the Bengals helmets. And, you know, Cincinnati's just down the road. They might as well be Indianapolis. So I took that a little bit personal. I never really thought much of Bob Costas one way or the other. And when that show came out, I watched it a couple different times. I was like, man, I completely was wrong about Bob Costas. It was a really great show. I haven't seen any of the episodes since they aired, and I can remember a bunch of different moments in that. So I'm hoping I would still dig it. But for that moment in time and not being able to, it felt more like things that you would get from a podcast. I remember an episode with Paul Simon. And one of the things that was so interesting about Costas is he really knew a lot about each guest. And I mean a lot. It was obvious that he didn't just read up and brush up on them. He was already well aware of things that they'd been doing. And this Paul Simon interview, he's quoting lyrics to obscure songs. I think at one time Simon looks over, he's like, do you have that written down somewhere? And he's like, no, I just remember it. And it's an interesting thing, but there's a moment where he asks him about Bob Dylan. And I think that Paul Simon had said something in an interview once about how it's so hard to say nice things about someone who really doesn't say nice things about other people. Something like that was what the quote was. I'm paraphrasing it, but it was along those lines. And Costas read that to him, and he's like, did I say that? You know? And he's like, yeah. And Paul Simon paused for a really long time, and you could tell he was really trying hard to communicate some very complex thoughts. Got an airplane going over. And he said something to the effect of, at the time, he just never heard Dylan saying nice things about other people. And he said when Simon and Garfunkel, he would always be compared to Bob Dylan. And who the hell can be compared to Bob Dylan? You know, that's not fair. And he said he just never measured up, so he always had that in the back of his head, and it was hard. I think later in Dylan's career, like when he did the Theme Time Radio Hour, he's saying great things about people all day long on that. But maybe Dylan just didn't have the opportunity or the frame of mind, whatever. Just at the time he wasn't doing those things in Paul Simon's mind. He might even said something like, I'm not listening to everything Dylan says. But I remember in that moment, do you guys remember the movie Mozart? Or is it Amadeus? Amadeus. There's Salieri, the character, I guess he's a rival to Mozart. It reminded me of Salieri talking about Mozart, mostly from that movie. But if Salieri lived in a different time, he would be this great composer and be the only one people were talking about, but he had the misfortune to live at the same time as Mozart. And Mozart was this amazing genius. And hearing Paul Simon talk about hearing Paul Simon talk about Dylan, just for some reason reminded me of Salieri talking about Mozart. And I remember, I'm going way down the rabbit hole here, but I ended up a couple different times in Vienna, and I found the cops are coming from me. So I said something bad about Spotify. I remember being in Vienna and I found this beautiful, beautiful old cemetery, huge cemetery, and it's where all these composers are buried. And there's a circle. It might have a name. It might be like Composer's Circle, but there's planted. The cold's getting to my brain. It's weakening badly. But in this circle, buried is Mozart, Brahms, Beethoven, Schubert. I'm trying to think. There's like all of these really famous conductors, or the first. I think the first sign of hypothermia is slow, slurred speech, and it's upon me. So there's this circle of all of the great composers, and Salieri is buried way over by the fence, up close to the wall or whatever. And I went over and visited his grave, and so that's sticking in my head when I'm thinking about this Bob Costas interview. I bet it's on YouTube, and I bet you a lot of you are going to look it up and link to it down below if I don't do it first. But also, as I'm standing here, I remember two other things about that cemetery. I remember walking around Vienna, going into these shops, and there would be these pictures, like big posters and signs and pictures of Falco. You remember Falco, Rock Me Amadeus, and Der Kommissar? Where don't turn around, uh-oh. I guess he had just died. And like every shop, every restaurant you went into, everywhere, there would be something commemorating Falco. We miss you, Falco. Falco lives forever. Things like that. And I guess he was from Vienna, or at least he was Austrian. And we were just like, whoa, man, this is like Elvis stuff. This is a big, big deal to these folks. So I started asking. Stray cat walking by over here. What's up, kitty? So I started asking people, well, is he buried here in Vienna? And they're like, oh yeah, and he was buried in that cemetery. The sun's trying to come out on me here. See if I can. Is buried in that cemetery. And so we went over to visit his grave, and you need to Google Falco's grave. It's a big half circle etched glass stone with a life-size black image of Falco, and it looks like he's wearing a cape or something. He looks like Dracula. It's pretty damn amazing, and it's one of the stranger graves that we visited. But we went and visited Falco's, and then while we were there in that cemetery, all of this is coming back to me now. While we were in that cemetery, we were looking for the grave of the guy that played Sergeant Schultz in Hogan's Heroes. I don't remember his name, but he's buried there. And man, we looked for hours and hours, and we're talking about a really, really big cemetery. I mean, it was huge. It was like the footprint of a shopping mall with the parking lot and all, like a really big, probably a half mile across one way, and we never found it. And it's bothered me for years. I couldn't find Sergeant Schultz's grave. I don't remember his name. I can't remember it, but that's coming in my brain. But I guess the last thing I'll leave you with is I remember going on that trip, and I could be with my buddy Todd, and us sitting out at the Opera House, on the steps of the Opera House in Vienna. Just a beautiful, beautiful city. We're sitting out there, probably in February, and we're eating bread and cheese. Just some of the best damn bread and the best cheese ever. Something about, if you ever walk into a cheese store in Europe and you're American, the smell hits you immediately. And I've walked into cheese stores in America and they don't smell at all. And I think that says something about our cheese and what the hell are we doing to it. But I remember sitting out there on the steps of the Opera House, and our plane tickets were like $450 round trip. And we had hardly any money, living out of a backpack, going to hostels and things like that. Just completely broke. Had not made, or Smokey, neighbor's dog, had not made any money in our lives, like any money. And but yet here we are sitting on the steps of the Opera House. We have all of these friends with careers, and jobs and commitments and things. So like make good money with nice houses and all that. None of them had the free time to go do what we were doing right then. And I remember just sitting out there underneath the stars, where Mozart, used to walk in and be treated like royalty. And there we are, a couple dirt bags sitting on the steps, taking it all in. And so if you have the ability to do the fun things, so if you have the time, you can do a lot of fun things without spending too much money on it. And I strongly urge you to give it a try. And I'm going to go finish drinking my coffee and go inside. And I don't know, much love to you guys.